Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer based in Charleston, South Carolina, who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is presented this year by Townsend Automotive in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The Honda CR-V has been my favorite vehicle in Honda's lineup for years because it has great gas mileage and can haul a vintage furniture find with ease. In fact, it's so easy for getting out there in general, from the beach to the mountains to even the next photo shoot for a Southern travel article. Purchasing a CR-V from Townsend Honda means purchasing from a family-owned company built on service and connection with its customers, and they want to remind you of the joys of a jaunt down the road. Visit townsendhonda.com for current inventory, or if you're in West Alabama, stop in. Townsend Honda salutes local entrepreneurs, from restaurateurs to podcasters, and they welcome you to be part of a community that does the same. Here's a new term you might want to remember: RTD, or ready to drink. Its growth in the beverage category is exponential, but I often found the cocktails too syrupy for my palate. Until now. Tip Top Proper Cocktails in Atlanta was founded by music industry veterans Neal Cohen and Yoni Reisman after they recognized a gap in the market for a quality portable cocktail. The recipes are developed by 7-time James Beard Award-nominated barman Miles Macquarrie of Atlanta's Kimball House and Watchman's. And they're so good, I can't quite decide which one is my favorite. How I Built This with Guy Raz is one of my go-to podcasts. And today, I pay homage to that particular form with this interview, recorded live at Kimball House as prep was beginning to ramp up all around us. Welcome to the Southern Fork, Tip Top.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's so nice to be back in Kimball. We had a wonderful experience here last night, Miles.
Good. Thank you so much.
The chartreuse tonic will be something that I dream about for a long time, only fighting in my mind with the French 75, which is the best French 75 I've ever had.
Thank you so much.
It was delicious. The oysters, beef tartare, all of it. So good. So we're back sitting here. It is an old train depot. And Miles, you've made a national name for yourself from behind the bar here. Can you talk about having a life in cocktails and spirits, and just give us a little, not like your origin story, but a lot of people have a derailment because they drink too much or they get burned out. You're a scholar of it, but there's still fun to it.
Yeah, I think life balance is certainly important with this line of work, and I just fell in love with it, and so it's like a hobby and a job, and I think that's what people dream for, and strive to do is to do something that you really love, and so I love it. I love, the history of it. I love that cocktails are an American culinary invention. There aren't that many of those, and I like tech, so I like using lots of, different equipment, but also respecting historical recipes and kind of blending the two together.
And like that French 75, will you just explain like what you explained to me last night before I ordered it?
Yeah, for sure. So that, classic drink. The first time I ever had it with cognac, I think was at Chris Hanna's bar when he was at French 75. Yeah. This was well over 10 years ago at this point. And really like that version. And for us here being an oyster bar and a restaurant as well as a cocktail bar, it had to work as a pairing. So it takes this old recipe, but then we clarify lemon juice for it, and we use Muscadet, which is a kind of quintessential oyster pairing wine. And then after the lemon juice goes through centrifuge, we blend the cognac, the lemon juice, a little bit of sugar, and the wine together, and we force carbonate it by using like a CO2 tank, and then put it in little bottles. And so we carbonate it multiple times to try and get a really tight champagne-esque bubble. So when it's in front of you, it looks more like a glass of champagne than a cocktail, but drinks like a French 75.
Yes. And all of that thought, that background is built through time.
Yes.
Understanding a decade ago, knowing what the French 75 was, understanding that the cognac is a different thing. All of that knowledge is built over time. Then go up with these two guys and you got to can the stuff. So I'd love to hear what drink or cocktail or what said Miles is the man to work for Tip Top. Who wants to talk about that?
Sure, I can dive in. Truthfully, I didn't know much about the cocktail industry at all, right? Neal or I didn't know much when we started. So we went to our friend David Stein, and he's one of the founders of Creature Comforts Brewery. Mm-hmm. Chatted with him.
Lovely
yeah,
beer.
Quite lovely beer. And he immediately suggested that we chat with Miles.
And they knew each other from working at the Brick Store Pub and Leon's prior to Kimball House.
Yes.
Right. So just we explained the idea. Miles was into it from the get-go, and off we went.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah,
so
sure does.
Canned cocktails were coming onto the market. First we saw canned wine, and then, I think Underwood really changed our idea about canned wine being good.
Yep.
Because before we had one of those little cardboard packets with the little milk cap, whatever those are. They're not good. Mm. Liberty Creek is never going to sponsor me after this, but Liberty Creek is not good. Don't buy that. And I only know that from experience. So, yeah, the Southern Fork has a budget sometimes. But then you have the cans, and then we started seeing cocktails get canned. And then 2020 happened, which we'll talk about in a minute, which changed. It pushed it so much faster. When you decided to make these cocktails, what were you thinking that you wanted them to be? Did you come and say, hey, we want to do some canned cocktails, and it was you, Miles, that came up with the flavors? Because there's some classic. They're classics.
Yeah, originally the thought was, I believe we wanted to do a Moscow Mule, a Gin Fizz or a Tom Collins, and a Paloma.
So none of those are available.
None of those are available. We did actually formulate those, but ultimately, in looking at the market, decided that's just too competitive of a space, right? To some degree, you're competing with White Claw. And then there's a bunch of other just carbonated, lower ABV cocktails out on the market.
And plus, the formulation was good, but it still didn't really, we got it as far as we felt like we could get it to be able to scale to the level that we needed to. And in tasting it, we're kind of like, this might not be the right call for us.
Right. Talk about the cocktails that you brought to Tip Top and said, let's work on these. Well,
it was definitely an open dialogue with Yoni and Neal, and I think the outside of the margarita, the old fashioned is like the most popular cocktail in the world these days. So that was kind of an easy one to decide to do. I think that they're easy to make, but also easy to mess up. And so
overly sweet.
Yes.
Can be so overly sweet. And I get a lot of canned cocktails. This is my first canned cocktail podcast for a reason. And I always try the old fashioned first. because that's going to really tell me the direction that this company went in. Because, I'm familiar.
Yeah. I mean, an old fashioned is arguably the simplest cocktail. It's just, spirit with a little bit of dilution, some bitters, and some sugar. And I think that finding like a harmonious balance between those ingredients is important. And it was important for me, if I was going to get behind something, to know that the people who were founders of the company were going to put flavor as like the number one, and not money first, but it has to taste good over all else. And they were very adamant about that and stayed true to it the whole time. So,
and then, I did not bring the margarita over, but it was pre-chilled, and now I'm really regretting that. I'm just sitting here going, well, it's rare that I can have a margarita at 11 a.m., so why did I not take that opportunity?
I can make you one real quick if you want me to.
When we're looking at the different flavors, you have how many in total right now?
So it's 6 in total are on the market, and it's broken down by the stirred line and the shaken line. We launched with the stirred line of old-fashioned Manhattan Negroni, and that was really also, as you mentioned, you're fairly wary of the category. You've tasted a lot you like, you've tasted a lot you haven't, and we wanted to, by starting with old-fashioned Manhattan and Negroni, which is sort of the trifecta of the stirred and spirit forward cocktails, that to people who've dismissed the category, they see that, and hopefully that's just a stamp of credibility right there. If this is a brand that's oriented by starting in that place, then when we shift to launch our shaken line, which we just rolled out in kind of this spring of 2021, if we had just come out with a margarita in a can, people would say, great, another margarita in a can. But here we have a margarita and a bee's knees and a traditional daiquiri to complement a line that has already established to the consumer that this is our perspective. This is where we're coming from.
Right. Well, and I said I tried the old fashioned first, and the Negroni was really the cannon shot over the bow. I was like, oh, I see what you're doing. Like, you're like, hey, we're real. And I get that. So they're smaller format. And when you're working with them, this is like batched cocktails kind of on crack, because batching cocktails sometimes is wonderful. It's the right thing to do. Because I talked to Demi at White Limousine in Nashville, and she was talking about how many touches a cocktail has. How did you begin creatively? This is something that's so new for you. You get to do something that's like a different sector of the business. Can you talk about how that pushed your brain creatively? Because you've got a really good creative brain.
Thank you. Here it was more about, I think, more than creativity, it was about consistency. And so how do we do it? Because, we're trying to do consistently made classic cocktails. So we're not being overly creative here. We're just trying to make sure that we're doing it to where it's the same drink every time there's a new run going to the canning line. Every time that there, does it taste the same 6 months later?
Right.
So I think that was the big thing, is like taking these flavors, figuring out how to scale them up and make it taste the same throughout.
And part of starting with the old-fashioned Manhattan and Negroni is that those cocktails we know are fully shelf-stable. You're not dealing with juices. Yoni and I's background is not, as Yoni mentioned, it's not in the alcohol or beverage or spirits business. It's music festivals. And so as we thought about this as a solution for that type of space where refrigeration might be a question, storage might be a question, how you're consuming it might be a question.
Right.
That all had to play into the decisions that we made, the tweaks that we made to the recipe, and in particular the cocktails we started with. So, that was definitely kind of top of mind as well.
Yeah. I love that idea of thinking about the problem and building a solution into that, and then kind of backing into it the whole way. Because from a culinary perspective, lots of times we want to do something. He has this idea like, I want to do this, and then maybe it doesn't work for the market, or maybe I only have a panini press and I don't have a sous vide machine and I can't really do that. And so it's wonderful to see that other way of thinking of problem solving. Once you got the consistency and got the scale, did you have a moment, all three of you, where you were like, yo, this is good, like we did this? Or did it, in like from a business perspective, I think people want to know, is there ever a moment when you're like, I think this could work? Or do you just keep going and not think about it that way? Because you're all doing so many other things. It's not like you're just sitting looking at it 24 hours a day.
I think being proud of what you do is great. I think, yes, you always will consider pushing forward and maybe even retweaking formulas eventually. But yeah, of course. I think that, like you said before, there are some good canned cocktails out there, but I think there are more bad than there are good. And so, because it isn't just like, okay, a bartender makes a good drink. You can't just easily scale that up to a production like this. And so I think, yeah, we're absolutely proud that we feel that these are the truest to those classic drinks that you can get in this format. So that was kind of the end goal, is like, how do we get as close as possible to a cocktail bar where people can take it out on, camping or have it at a music venue or on an airplane.
Exactly. And then 2020 happened. So you're just doing this thing, and then all of a sudden some states don't allow to go drinks, and then you've got the canned cocktail made by Miles, where I can have a real cocktail that I can't make at home. I don't have all the ingredients, and if I did, I don't have the skill to make that level. How did that change your business just when it was kind of, it's still very new.
Still ramping up, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for one, it took away the sampling opportunities, the in-person sampling opportunities, which is the number one tool in the toolkit of establishing a new brand in this marketplace. And then also like not having that feedback loop as readily, because you talk about the moment where it felt like this was working. It was the first tasting events that we went to that people walked up and said, oh, you got an old-fashioned in a can? That old-fashioned is my drink. I'm going to try this. Like, kind of betting against us. And then you taste it and you see their eyes just kind of light up. And you're like, oh, like we can really put this against most of the consumers out there. Everyone's got their specifications by how they like their drink. But if we can really hit on all the like sensory kind of areas that is meant to be lit up when you have one of these drinks, then we're doing it right and we're exceeding expectations.
Right.
But how we have adjusted was really that we were only available in Georgia when the pandemic started, and over a series of months, as the RTD, the ready to drink category was already trending and became accelerated, everyone wanted to tell the story. But from the perspective of, if you had dismissed this category in the past, it's time to think again. So while we didn't have the marketing tool of events and sampling, what we did have was a press story that really fit what a lot of the publications wanted to tell. As such, we ended up with a listing of national press that allowed us to punch way above our weight class because we fit into that narrative.
Right. And for you still had something to do. You had something to work on, something to build in a place, holding and dealing with all the things here, because management, you're doing so much trying to keep a place afloat.
Yeah, as a managing owner of 2 restaurants, I think that a lot of it was just spent trying to keep those alive and do what I could to help maintain consistency at Tip Top, and talking to these guys saying, hey, I might need a full-time job if this goes the wrong direction. So yeah, honestly, a lot of 2020 was just trying to save our restaurants, which we feel like we did, and we're on the other side of it now. So
exactly. So now it can be fun again, and so we went from no one flying to now you have a partnership with Delta. Talk a little bit about that, because it's pretty sweet to be sitting in a seat and then get a really nice cocktail instead of a plastic cup with ice and a mini bottle and a Coke.
Yeah, I'd say that partnership is sort of a dream, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to believe that it's actually happened. I haven't been on a plane yet. I hope to soon to see it in real life. But yeah, it's something we were working on for many years, right? Sort of an ideal place for this to exist. And like you mentioned before, we felt it solved a problem, right? Flight attendants don't really, they're not mixing drinks for people, certainly. Mm-hmm. And I think folks on a plane might sometimes prefer more than an airplane bottle, like you said.
And it's also just enough. I mean, an airplane bottle can be too much. I mean, or not enough, depending on the person. But, it's more than one cocktail. I live in South Carolina. We used to have mini bottles behind the bar. We were the last state to do that, and I think the last state, but it made every drink super crazy strong.
Well, are those 60 mils or what is it? Airplane
Those
bottle?
are 50.
50 mils? So, I mean, it's just over an ounce and a half. It's not.
Yeah, but if you have a Long Island iced tea, they have to use them all.
5 of those.
Yeah.
Heard it.
So you would either order one or you'd order one 3 ways.
I remember that, one 3 ways.
Yeah, and that was a whole thing. But did that partnership come to fruition? I mean, Delta is based here in Atlanta, so Delta's really connected to this Atlanta scene. Y'all are here. Miles is here. This is very much, it feels like a hometown thing, even though it has much bigger reach than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it happened, we tried to tackle it from a number of different avenues, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing that it was probably out of reach, quite honestly. Like, who do we think we are that we could actually get on Delta Airlines? Miles had a relationship, I believe, with someone who is no longer at Delta, but that's one way we got the conversation started. And then, through anyone we knew, we were asking, anyone at Delta. We went through an RFP process, which I think they ended up abandoning because the pandemic happened. But yeah, quite honestly, I'm not 100% sure how it got to the right people, but over time it did. It may have been a number of different angles.
When you got to the right person, what cocktails did you serve them from the line?
I think naturally, right, understanding the most popular ones, the old-fashioned margarita was just sort of the obvious choice. Mm-hmm. So that's what we recommended. We tried to add the Negroni in the mix because, that's a crowd pleaser for people who, like Negronis. They tend to love Negronis. So I think that would be, for people who love Negronis, if they're offered one on a plane, that's pretty remarkable, I think.
Right. It is pretty remarkable.
And when we were actually starting to have a more serious conversation with them, they didn't know that we actually had the shaken line, in progress. Mm-hmm. And so you asked what we served them. We actually served them the 3 that we had in cans, and then we served them 3 that were just the formulations. They were finalized formulations, but it was prior to ever having done any scaled up production of it to them. So the shaken line was also something they tasted through.
Do you feel like you've solved the problem that you identified, the hole in the market that you identified?
I think we're on our way, right?
Yeah.
Like we're sort of still at the beginning. That's how I view it. But I think as a collective, people are starting to realize that the RTD category isn't something to be dismissed. Like, you can actually get quality cocktails in a can. So I think collectively making headway.
There's a lot of potential. I'm very fascinated with all of this market. I don't understand the flavored seltzer, hard seltzer thing. I do understand it.
I don't understand it. I like flavored seltzer, but I like it to be alcohol free. I like my alcohol to taste like alcohol, and I like my non-alcoholic products to not.
Right. That is me. But because I'm never, if somebody slides a drink to me and says, try this, you can't even tell there's alcohol in it. I know I'm not going to like it.
Yeah,
it's not going to be a cocktail that is my style of cocktail.
But going back to where we fit in, if you're at a tailgate, if you're at someone's barbecue, if you know, and my tolerance for beer has gone way, way down. I won't really even consider taking a beer out of that cooler. And if they've got wine and seltzer in that cooler and they don't have Tip Top, which if I'm showing up at the party, they usually will. But the seltzer option is a refreshing option.
Right.
I've yet to really find one I truly enjoy. I keep trying them because I do want to understand the category.
Well, and you should, because it's in your category too. I mean,
Right.
there's a Venn diagram of overlap there.
100%.
But I think for me, I see it as a vehicle to get to a place.
Yes.
Not to enjoy the journey.
I think that's
agree
right.
with that 100%. And that's like,
And that's the difference. And I think those are the kind of cocktails that I want to drink and the kind of spirits I want to drink. I'm not drinking to get to somewhere. I mean, that's a nice place to be there, but it's also a bad place to be go in the wrong direction.
for sure.
Yeah.
And so I really love all the flavors and the experiment of that. Miles, this has been a hell of a year. Just crazy. But you have a Delta thing, and you've got this company, and you're through the other side, and you just had a wine dinner last night, the second wine dinner in a week. What is making you hungry now? Can you take a breath? Are you excited about something, or are you just wanting to kind of smooth sail?
No, I mean, I'm excited about just us operating at and like just pushing as hard as we were before COVID hit. Like, it seems like for a while everyone's like, oh, well, where are we cutting corners? You know, where are we going to look to? Are we going to stop sourcing local? And we're pushing hard with preservation, with changing our menus all the time, with like going just as hard, if not harder than we were before the pandemic. And so that's what drives me, is to keep trying to never rest on laurels, to keep trying to make this restaurant and our other restaurant as good as we can. And,
Right.
And seeing people enjoy that, and seeing people that we haven't seen for a year come back for the first time and say, wow, it's like we never left, or like, this is some of the best stuff that you've been doing ever since, way before. And so it's that just the future of the renaissance of bars and restaurants and food and beverage culture is kind of what I'm excited about, because the whole thing was basically almost dead for a year.
It was muted. It was like, what can we do?
Yeah,
to
what can we
hold
do
our breath?
just to like
Hold our breath.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and now it's there. I think there will be a renaissance of, we're already seeing like great business, in old regular guests coming back and new ones that we've made throughout we've made new regular clientele throughout the pandemic. And so just continuing to reach out to the community. And
do you foresee actually expanding the line from your current line that you have right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we're constantly looking at new things, thinking up ideas. We're formulating some new drinks now. We also have to focus too. So it's hard to balance that, wanting to be more creative and pushing the boundaries, and also focus on doing what you do and doing it well.
Yeah.
But there's some things in the works.
And the future for us, is really about continuing to solve the problem. And that means that it's getting the product out to more and more places where you may not be able to get a quality cocktail, and then, keeping up with pace of demand, and, showing by expanding our offering that Tip Top is a brand not just for you that loves an old fashioned, but it's for you that loves, different drinks at different times, at different occasions.
Exactly. And I'm not that person. And I think a lot of people that are food and beverage people, cocktail people, they don't have one drink. They have some favorites, but it's an occasion. It's like, what am I eating? What have I done today? What is the temperature outside? What is seasonally good? That kind of stuff. So there's there's an excitement of choosing. That's the best thing about being in this business, is just the variety of things. Now, you all have aspects of your job that really mesh with an aspect of your personality. So I'd love to hear from both of you. And then Miles, what is one aspect that fits like a puzzle piece with this job that you've built into part of your life?
Sure, I can start.
Everyone's pointing, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say for me, I think it's just problem solving generally, right? You mentioned before how lots of people in restaurants don't come at it from that angle. And frankly, I'm a little jealous of that. Like you said, I just want to do something, right? Make something and see what exists. And that seems pretty freeing, but
it is until the kite string is out. And then you realize, like, you're
there's no
running,
end.
There's no end to it.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, this isn't really, like, I didn't check to see, like, if this is sustainable.
Yeah, but there's still something freeing about that, I
right.
imagine. But yeah, from my perspective, I think it's just generally problem solving, right? Something pops up, better figure it out, right? Because you need to.
Yeah, and for me, it's really storytelling, i.e. branding, marketing, as well as relationship building. My first kind of moment where the culinary world spoke to me was in college. I got a job at Zingerman's in Ann Arbor, Michigan as a cheesemonger.
Oh, that's a great position,
realizing that cheese wasn't just cheese, it was the geopolitical situation that got that cheese to even be a product, to get it to the United States, and telling those stories to customers who just came in for a sandwich, having them leave with $30 worth of cheese was sort of like illuminating to me, and has carried through the festival business. It's not just about gathering a bunch of people to see their favorite band in a place once a year. It's about all the relationships and all the different things that are celebrated under that roof. And then with Tip Top, it's really the sort of mythology around these drinks, the place and time and the occasions and the associations that people have with them, and sort of playing with that and then bringing it out to the world and, kind of showcasing it.
Yeah.
And for me, I like people. I think that is really important in the hospitality business, because there are some people that, got in it, but maybe they don't love working with other people. So I like teaching. I get to do that. I get to work around people. I like creating. I get to do that. I love seasons. So that's a big part of what we do. I like working with my hands and making things. And so there's all of these different parts, I think, that mesh with it. From I love things that look nice. I like colors, so being able to do all that and think about, I like history. There's history in it.
You're a scholar of the work, but also bringing it forward.
Yes.
So that's fun. I mean, you're not trying to create a historical thing in wax paper. You're taking the understanding the history, understanding the context, and consistently moving it forward. That's why I've always been a fangirl of Miles. It's embarrassing.
well, thank you. Me too.
Miles is like, oh god.
Very flattering. But I do. I think, like, even just the bending rules and learning something, and then thinking about the way somebody did something a long time ago, and then, well, how can we change that, or and constantly evolving.
And when it comes to Tip Top, how can we can that?
Yeah.
And make it consistent.
And make it consistent, make it taste good.
That pushes another part of your creativity.
For sure.
That's super
and that
fun.
was a very challenging part, because it was like, well, I can make a Negroni taste good. Why can't we just make this taste good right away? Like, what's so hard? Because it wasn't easy to get them to the final to where they are in the can. It was a long road.
We're still tweaking it
for sure. Yeah.
Well,
definitely long.
And I speak to people that have, like, I spoke to Lily's of Charleston a few weeks ago, who has an amazing mustard-based barbecue sauce, and there's a big space between I make something good, I want to sell it, or grandma's chicken salad, or, a rib rub, or even, rib rub is maybe a simple thing, spices shelf stable, that kind of stuff. But there is a difficult thing for scaling up. So What's keeping you up at night when concerning this particular aspect of what you do, this canned cocktails for Tip Top?
I worry that a whole batch is going to go bad or something in the can. And, mostly for me, it's if something goes wrong on a production side and I like to think that I like to be in control. And sometimes when you're producing at that large of a scale, I feel like maybe the control isn't there. But fortunately, every time before something goes to the can, they bring me samples. We taste through it before anything goes to canning line. Just to make sure everything stays consistent from batch to batch. So I feel confident about it, but
Yeah. All right. I bring out something for Southern Fork guests, only it's my magic picnic basket. I do not believe in the death penalty, so this isn't a death row meal. This is a meal to bring you to life. I can time travel. I can go back to conscript anybody to make one of these meals that pops in your head when I say, what is one of the best things you've ever had? I can source for you. Obviously, I believe that we probably need to have some beverages in here. But I would love to bring you some of your favorite things. So what can I bring you in this basket?
Well, for me, if we are talking about like a ultimate meal, if you're not going to eat again, or if it's new, I think 6 oysters and a shrimp cocktail with a dry martini, beef tartare, Caesar salad, good glass of wine, and then finish with a Sazerac and like a milfoy or something. Just like an elegant bistro style.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. We always say like we sell lots of spirits here, but I think wine in between for pairings is wonderful. So we like to try and tell people to have the guest bookend with a cocktail. So you start with one and finish with one and have wine right in the center. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I would like to, if I'm doing a grandiose dinner, that's kind of how I like to do it.
That's great. Guys?
I'm not so much a foodie as Miles or Neal. I'm more of a simple man. Just a really nicely cooked steak would do me well, and perhaps a martini with that sounds nice too.
Sounds great. I know someone that could make that for you.
Maybe I should eat with Miles though.
Yeah, he knows how to order. Like he was like, "Oh, I've got this. Yeah. I know what's up." Sometimes people stare at the ceiling. Miles is like, "Oh, I'm ready. Yeah. Let's do it."
Yeah, I mean, my mind goes into a lot of different places because I'm indecisive, and if I stare at, I can stare at a menu for half an hour. I'm that guy. Like, keep coming over, and I'm like, I'm gonna need another minute. But,
so, do you have order envy if you see that somebody else ordered something and you wish you could?
Absolutely, I always have buyer's remorse. But I mean, the easy answer for me is a Reuben sandwich from Zingerman's Deli, as I mentioned before. Corned beef Reuben, sauerkraut, not coleslaw. 2-ounce side of Russian dressing for dipping my crusts in afterwards. And,
I love the 2-ounce organization. Yes. You're like, oh yeah, like that 1-ounce cup is not going to work. No, I need the 2-ounce.
So that's the simple answer for me.
That's great. And beverages for you too?
I went with a martini.
Yeah.
That's always going to please me as well as a dry,
I love
dry
it.
gin
It's a martini table.
Yeah.
I think it's the way to go. Well, if people want to learn more about Tip Top cocktails and the margarita that I'm about to crack the can of right now, you can go to thesouthernfork.com. I am going to have links there as well as images, the face behind the voice. Also, if you are flying Delta in certain classes, you will be able to purchase a Tip Top when you are 10,000 feet and above in the air. And this is an Atlanta-based story. I love stories that are anchored in place. Just like Neal said, storytelling food is so much more than just, and drink is so much more than what's in the can or what's on the plate. This is an Atlanta story that I love this city, and I'm happy to bring this. So if you like what you hear, there are more than 225 other episodes. The easiest way to remember that they exist is to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And there's a lot of other Atlanta content and a lot of other cocktail content too. So thanks so much for visiting with me today. Thanks so much to Maddie, who was coloring so nicely. Miles, actually drawing. Coloring is what I did. Like I looked at her page and I'm like, oh, that's a different level. But Miles is 4.5.
4.5-year-old, yeah.
Yeah, it's been so good sitting quietly while we worked this out today. So cheers to all of you. congrats on a wonderful product.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. I'm releasing this episode because I'm guessing if you're like me, you're maybe making some plans for 4th of July, and those plans might include a cookout. If so, I hope you'll consider putting some of past Southern Fork guests in that cookout beverage cooler, including this week's guests' tip-top proper cocktails. But I would also like to respectfully ask that you also consider putting some non-alcoholic beverages in those coolers as well. Lots of times, good hospitality means anticipating guests' needs, and not every guest wants to have an alcoholic beverage, and not every guest might want an alcoholic beverage every round. So putting some lovely things in the cooler besides just bubble water is a nice thing. I often like to do a lemonade and add some herbs to it, something fresh and plentiful from the garden. Anything from thyme to basil to rosemary to all three all go well in that lemonade, and you can put it in small mason jars. We all know you have those left over from 2020 canning projects, and put those in the cooler for folks as well. It's just really nice to not have to ask for something else and not have to explain anything. There is no reason why somebody who doesn't enjoy an alcoholic beverage can't enjoy your party. So anyway, happy cooking, happy sipping, and I'll talk to you next week. You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?